So my words of encouragement didn't get uh, um, didn't get recorded, but that's okay because the essence, the most special part, but the important part is what comes next. All right, so I'm Howard Cohen, and I've been involved with Africa Fire Mission now for 5 years. I've been to Kenya 4 times for to do to be part of the symposium. I will be going back to Kenya this fall as part of um, the small team of folks who will be teaching, helping and supervising, training uh, a small group of people to do fire prevention and fire education. And one of my jobs with Africa Fire Mission is I'm the behind the scenes guy for these online programs. I coordinate them. I recruit instructors for them, and on occasion I'm an instructor for them. Well, so that's me. And today's program is about something that actually it's very near and dear to my heart. It's actually two components to it. The first is called after accident review, sometimes just written out in shorthand as AAR, and the other is something called critical incident management. So I'm going to introduce you to both of these today because they do dovetail, they do relate to one another. Um, the after accident review is something that you can take from this workshop and begin to immediately bring to your departments. The critical incident management is more complicated, and in order to really do it, it requires a significant amount of training, but it's important to be aware of what's involved with it, and so at some level you can still incorporate it into your departments. So with that, I should also tell you, I'm a retired firefighter. I spent 20 years as a firefighter and a chaplain in a fire department. And I retired mostly because of age. As you all know, being a firefighter gets harder the older you get. So, part one of this presentation is about after accident review. Part two is critical incident management. This is what an after action review is, or an AAR. This is the definition right up here. It's a professional discussion of an event after a response has concluded for the purpose of analyzing what happened, why, and how the response could be improved. The AAR is a really important and often overlooked training tool. Sometimes people call it debriefings, but AAR is kind of a technical name or the official name. An AAR is a discussion of an event to examine what happened, why it happened, what improvements could be made, and who needs to know what was learned. I'm going to walk you through these steps. First of all, a little background. AARs, after action reviews, were originally developed by the United States Army in the 70s. It grew out of research and informal debriefings. AARs are now used in many different industries, including fire service, EMS, hospitals, and even sports teams use essentially the AAR. So it's not just a military thing. It's not just a first responders thing. It can be used in a lot of different applications. So why bother with an AAR? Well, studies have demonstrated that AARs have a real positive impact on the culture of organizations that utilize them. What do? They increase trust among team members. They improve the ability to deliver services. And they, most importantly, improve safety on the fire ground or whatever the emergency scene situation is. So an AAR is an important component in creating a culture of positive change within a department. AARs, whether structured and formal or informal, encourage a candid critique and evaluation of a crew's strengths and areas needing improvement. The key to successfully using the AAR is that it is done after every incident, no matter how small or seemingly routine, even after drills. As we know, any call, no matter how routine it may seem, has the potential to turn into something life-threatening. Thus, something innocuous learned in one AAR might be instrumental in avoiding something serious in a future incident. One of the reasons why an AAR is so effective is that when it is done properly, there's no ego involved. You take the ego out of the incident. An AAR is not about finger pointing, judging, or critiquing individuals. And when you do an AAR, there is no rank and everyone gets to speak. So officially, an AAR is 5 simple questions. Question number 1. What was your intention? What was your intention at the scene that you responded to? Straightforward. However, as I'm sure you all know, there are times when it's simply not clear what your intentions were because either they weren't communicated properly or there was misunderstanding. It doesn't really matter. So what was our intention? And then we need to ask ourselves, what actually happened? Did we actually address what we had intended to address? There are actually different ways to organize an AAR. But like I said, the original model was based on these 5 specific open-ended questions. Now, an open-ended question is a question that you don't answer with yes or no or maybe. What was our intention? You can't say yes, you can't say no, you have to explain what it was. So let's move on to the next set of questions. Question number 3. What could have gone better? This question is intended to help identify specific actionable recommendations. Whoever is facilitating the AAR, and it could be anybody, it doesn't have to be a person of particular rank, asks the team members for crisp and clear, achievable and future-oriented recommendations. You can't be vague things like, we need to improve our communication. How do you need to improve your communication? What do you specifically need to do? That's what it means by clear, crisp, and achievable recommendations. No finger pointing or criticizing of individuals allowed. An AAR is not about saying it was his fault, he didn't tell me, he forgot. It's not about doing that. If you forgot to bring something with you, then it's that we as a team forgot to bring something that needed to happen, or we need to make sure that we don't forget in the future. We're not pointing fingers at anybody. Finding out what people did is not nearly as important as why they did it. So you want to listen to people. You want to use your active listening skills. You're not looking to immediately solve or correct problems or issues, but you want to hear about them. You want people to talk through what was going on for them. We know when something doesn't go right, but now it's helpful to understand what was the person thinking about who might have been involved with something that didn't go right, or what was the team thinking about. You really want to get into the why question. You're trying to get to the root of the problem, and you want everyone to be encouraged to speak their mind. Question number 4. What should we have done differently? Okay, you're looking at something and you say, well, we now know we shouldn't have taken that route to get to the incident because of the traffic. Or we now know that we need to make sure that we have X, Y, and Z with us. Doesn't matter. But it's what we should have done differently because we're going to do it in the future. We're going to change for the future how we do things. We might discover we need some additional training. You got to a scene and you didn't really know what to do. Why? Because you didn't have much training in that situation. Okay. We're not going to beat ourselves up for that. What we want to do is make sure that we're learning what we need to do going forward. Maybe our situational awareness wasn't what it should be. So we're now realizing we need to pay more attention to situational awareness. Did we recognize all the risks and hazards? Again, we're not trying to beat ourselves up. We're just trying to make ourselves better for the next time. And that's why it's so important to do these reviews. Do we need to change our policies and procedures? Are we discovering situations are changing on the ground and how we're being trained at our fire schools or on our initial fire training is no longer current. Big problem here in the United States in this area is that for years and years and years, everyone who was taught how to do a search in a building was taught to get down on your hands and knees, crawl, and hold on to the boot of the person in front of you so you don't get lost. Well, now we know that's a really impractical way of doing it, so we've got to go back and retrain everybody. So we have to change our policies. But if your policies say you're supposed to do that, then you've got to do what your policies say, but you want your policies to be current, so that's why we might need to bring some changes back. That brings me to question number 5. Let's see. How come question number 5 is not coming up? There we go. Who needs to know what we've learned at the AAR? Not sharing knowledge that you acquire at an AAR is a cardinal sin. It is not, there's no power in holding on to information that that you think gives you some sort of advantage over other people. That's just crazy because you're going to the fire ground, you're going to an emergency response. You want everybody to have enough knowledge and the same knowledge as you have to be able to make a difference at that situation. So you need to share the information with what comes out of the AAR, because you might have information that could help someone avoid a painful situation in the future. That's an AAR. Straightforward. 5 questions. So it helps to know who you should tell in your chain of command, in your departments, in your firehouses. Where do you want people? How do you want people to know what you learned? So here they are again. Formal. These are the formal 5 questions of an AAR, an after action review. Remember, what makes them so effective is that they take ego out of evaluating an incident, because they're not about finger pointing. They're not about judging or critiquing one another. There's no rank. Everyone gets to speak. And you're only dealing with issues that are related to the team's performance at that particular incident. Now, when do you do an AAR? You could do an AAR, if there's a small event, just before you all head back to the firehouse. You could just sit around and, go through these questions. Or you go back to your fire station and you have a more formal sit down. Doesn't matter. Someone needs to mute themselves, please. Mute all. All right. So I hope you guys can hear me when I said I click mute all. If you can't hear me, someone on mute and tell me. Okay, just a little reminder. I know I'm repeating myself, but it's worth doing. AARs are not about finger pointing, judging, or critiquing individuals. It's not about assessing blame. Keep your ego out of the AAR. Now, sometimes the AAR, the 5 questions, you want something a little more informal. So this is an informal AAR. Um, it serves similar purpose. It doesn't quite go to the same level of depth. Let me run through this for you. It's called, it's got 3 questions. It's known as the what stage. Okay, so we start with, what was the team's main effort or focus? All right, straightforward. What is the purpose of reviewing this event? Why are we doing this? What expectations do you have for today's discussion? Those are the whats. Sometimes you want to do this kind of debriefing or after action review when you're with a group of people that you don't usually work with, and you just want to kind of review everything that went on. Sorry for some of these little interruptions. I have things popping up on the screen like need to admit people and so forth. Okay, so you asked the what stage. What was, what? Now you go to the so what stage. The so what stage is, so what are your general reactions after the event? So what specific things were difficult or created friction during the event? So what positive actions occurred during the event? You gather observations on actions. Next, you gather observations on what actions were effective and problematic by asking, so what, ... And then you get to the now what stage. Now, what do we do with what we learned? So you want to finish up by asking, now what learning points can we take away from this event? Now, what follow-up actions should happen? Now, what aspects should be worked on first? Now, what would be the consequence if there's no follow-up action? So, you see, it's asking yourself questions and giving yourself guidance and directions for what questions to ask. And if you notice, they're all what we call open-ended questions. That is, you can't just ask them, answer yes, no, maybe, or I don't know. They're questions that ask you to dig down. So the key to the after action review and the key to this, what stage question review is asking open-ended questions. So that's after action review. That's something you all can take back to your fire stations, your ambulance houses, wherever you work, whatever department. If maybe you're not a first responder in EMS or fire, you could use an after action review in any kind of situation that you're in your work situation. It's all about reviewing what you did without ego to get to what went right, what went wrong, what do we need to do differently, and who do we let know what was going on. That's what after action review is all about. Okay, shifting gears, going into a deeper, more serious. Going into a bit more serious aspect of reviewing situations. This is part 2, critical incident stress management, also known as, in short, as CISM. So just background, I'm a part of a CISM team, which you'll get to know more about as I go through this. And basically what happens is anywhere in my state, if there's a really traumatic incident for the fire department, within 24 hours, I get a phone call that says, we need a CISM team. And what I do is I organize a group of people to go in to debrief the folks who experienced the traumatic event. So that I've been doing that for 6 years now, and so I think it's a really important and often overlooked aspect of the work that we do as first responders because we deal with a lot of unpleasant stuff. So CISM is a type of crisis intervention. It was designed to provide support for those of us who have experienced traumatic events. It is a short-term, peer-to-peer based stress reduction program. It was developed by a couple of guys a number of years ago. I want to emphasize peer-to-peer. We're not therapists. We're not clinicians. We're people who work in the trenches or have worked in the trenches. We're one of you guys, as it were. As I just said, CISM is short-term, peer-to-peer stress reduction. It's not therapy. The goals of CISM are this: to lessen the impact of the critical incident, to normalize the instinctive reactions to the incident, and finally, to encourage the natural recovery process. I'll explain each of these a little bit more in more detail. Ultimately, the goals of CISM is to restore the adaptive functioning skills of the person and or group, and to determine the need for further supportive services or therapy. What I mean here is that when a group experiences or an individual experiences or is processing a traumatic event, it has the potential to negatively impact their behaviors and their ability to perform their jobs or live their life in a healthy way. So that's what it means by restore the adaptive functioning skills. We all have skills for dealing with bad stuff that happens to us, but sometimes we get overwhelmed by the number of bad things going on around us, and our skills start to not meet the challenge. I want to play a short video to talk about the impact of the positive impact of doing a system and why it's important. So hold on a second. Let me get this up. Okay, come on, you're supposed. Oh, let's do it. Here we go.
We were sitting around the station. It was a Sunday afternoon, playing tiddlywinks or whatever. Probably not that, but I think we were playing cards. And I remember vividly complaining. It was boring. So this is boring. There's nothing going on. I wish it was a fire. And then the bell tipped and off we went. There was a fire across the street from the Admiral Street Fire Station, right across the street. It took us about 5 minutes to get there. We were in a different part of the town. And there were 2 kids in a rear bedroom. Search went on, and they took the kids out, and they were dead. 2-year-old and 1.5-year-old. No, it was 1.5 and 3-year-old. And I was on the rescue that day, detailed. I was normally on the fire engine, but for some reason I've been detailed to rescue. So the fireman brought the one baby to me and just handed it to me. And then the body was so hot, my gloves actually melted onto his skin. And then they brought the little girl out, and I had them both. And I brought them over to the rescue. And I was a fireman at the time. I wasn't even in EMS. I was an EMT basic. So I did what EMT basics do. I had both of them on the stretcher, doing compressions on one and bagging the girl. And anyways, I thought it was pretty bad, but I handled it, so I thought, very well. Brought them to the hospital and tried, but they died. Then we have this thing called a critical incident stress debriefing. About a week later, and there was a veteran firefighter there, a guy named Billy. And we were talking about it, and it's supposed to help, but being an arrogant young man, I was didn't need this, and I was just kind of going along for the ride. And Billy broke down. I just couldn't understand it. I truly couldn't understand why, because that's what we do, The kids died, and it didn't bother me, so I thought, but I talked to Billy some years later, and he remembered that incident debriefing, and he remembered looking at me and saying, he's going to be in my shoes someday. And sure enough, I was. It just culminates. That call 24 years later, it's vivid as yesterday. It truly is. And it stuck with me, even though I didn't think it would. And all the other calls that went after it, they just add up. They really do. And we deal with it, we go on, but it changes you. It changes you a lot. And plus age, and I don't think there's anything far different from people aging and experiencing life. It's just a little more colorful at times, I think.
Okay. You heard what he had to say. It's critical incidents. The debriefing, he called it a debriefing, a critical incident debriefing. That's what a CISM is. So let's talk about what's a critical incident. This is a definition. It is an event that can create significant human distress or stress and overwhelm a person's usual coping mechanisms. Now, what's important to understand is that as first responders, we're always we're constantly being exposed to critical incidents. But like he pointed out, sometimes they don't really quite affect us in the immediate. Like he said, it took 24 years before they all came back. I can tell you from my experience, a couple of particular bad calls that I responded to years ago. We're talking 10, 15 years ago. I can see them vividly. These particular incidents that come to mind vividly, even though it's been 20 years since they actually happened. So what are examples of critical incidences? This is just a partial example, but just to give you a sense. Look at my line of duty death, serious line of duty injury, suicide of an emergency of one of your colleagues, a multi-casualty incident, a police shooting. In fact, any significant event with trauma, injury, doesn't have to be death, could be a critical incident. A significant event involving children, when the victim is known to you. And sometimes a prolonged incident with or without loss can create stress. You know what it's like. It's like there's no end to the pressure on you. Excessive media interest can also produce stress. So what is stress? Stress is a physical and chemical and emotional response to challenges or demands in life. Stress is real. It physically impacts us. It changes us inside chemically. Now, stress actually evolved as a defense mechanism thousands of years ago. You're all familiar with the stress responses of the body for fight, flight, or freeze. And we see it in animals. Some animals flee in the middle as soon as they're exposed to danger. Some freeze, and some fight. The stress is caused by the adrenaline glands releasing a chemical called cortisone. And it also leads to other physiological changes within the body, which, by the way, accumulatively are a serious threat to our overall health. Okay, so you got it. Fight, flight, or freeze. Those are typical stress responses. Okay, so some stress is normal and healthy. Stress can improve our performance. Stress can make us more alert and enhance our situational awareness. Too much stress is not. That's where the problem is. I love this little cartoon. Sorry, this little thingy here is in the way. Little cartoon says, well, thank God we all made it out in time. Of course, now we're equally screwed, and you can see it's fish in a fishbowl. So that's acute stress, and it results from an isolated incident. This is the kind of stress that tends to get us first responders. It's the kind of stress that's like drops of water, one, until the bucket is overloaded. So, as the saying goes, it was the straw that broke the camel's back. It's that final event that makes everything, brings it all out. And that's why, so often for first responders, that final event that causes the real stress breakdown seems like not real serious, but because it's a result of the building up of all the stress stuff. So your reaction to stress is your reaction. Like I said, everybody has something unique about them, and we all uniquely respond to stress in different ways. There is neither a right or wrong way. In fact, there's no wrong way to respond because everybody's going to do it differently. The problem is that how we're responding might be unhealthy for us and the people around us. And you can see this partial list of related stress symptoms. And the list goes on and on. So this is what a stress management is. It's you're responding to stress. Yeah, an event happened. This is what a system does. I think I have a slide out of order. Let me go back. Let me skip that stuff. Let me go back, jump to this one. Okay. We want to diffuse the event. We want to normalize what's going on for a person or a group of people because of a stressful event. So we have the first level of a system response is called a diffusing. They all begin the same, whether it's a debriefing or a diffusing or a one-on-one interaction. They all begin by making sure you start with introducing yourself. Hey, this is who I am. I'm a peer. This is my background. Here's where I'm coming from. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a clinician. I'm not a counselor. I'm here to be a support for you. It's really important to start off with that initial introduction, with the emphasis being, I'm a peer. I'm one of you. That makes a big difference to people when they hear that right away. It relaxes them. Then you want to explore what went on. What was from their point of view? What did they see? What did they experience? Encourage them to share as much as they're comfortable sharing. And then you want to get into the information stage. And that's when you're going to talk to them about what stress responses look like. Ways to handle stress. Ways to handle when the stress is causing unhealthy behaviors in you. What things to do. So it's a pretty straightforward, get to know, connect with the person, explore with them with what's going on, and then share information with them. That's the basic diffusing. Now, when you get into a debriefing, a crisis incident stress debriefing, this is a bit more involved. And frankly, for the most part, you guys could do the diffusing just based on what you're learning here today. The debriefing has 7 very specific steps and takes a little bit more training. Basic training is 2 days long, and then there's advanced levels of training. But again, it starts with introductions. We always start with introductions. Hey, I'm Howard. I was a firefighter for 20 years. I work mostly with volunteer firefighters, so I say I was a volunteer firefighter, so I know what that's like. I know what's been like for you. I'm laying things out. Then I'm going to lay out my expectations, what this is about, what we're going to do today during this session. And part of that, and time limits what I can go do with you, and also I can't train you to do this over a Zoom like this in 45, 50 minutes. But there are 5 questions that I tell them that I'm going to ask you to consider answering. Nobody's ever required to talk. If they want to, they talk. If they don't want to, they don't. But I'm going to lay that out to them. Then I go to, these are the 7 steps, but I'm going to take you through them. Introductions, we've just done that. Now we're going to get to the fact phase. And the fact phase is when I'm going to ask the participants, what was your role during the incident? What did you observe? Just talking about facts. What did you see? What was happening? We're not talking about the emotional impact. We're not talking about what was going through your mind. We're just like, what were the facts? That might include, it was a really cold night and it was raining and there were people standing around screaming, and those are things like that are facts. Okay, so that's step number two. You want people to talk about their facts. By the way, I need to just tell you that when you do a debriefing or a defusing, only the people involved with the incident should be attending. An important rule. You don't want people who are just, curious. You don't want sightseers. You don't want members of your department who weren't working that night to be there, because it makes it harder to be, to be talking to a more privately. Third step is, now, what were your impressions? What were your thoughts? What was going through your head? You know, were you thinking, oh my, I think I know this guy, or I recognize that car? Could that be my neighbor? You know, so whatever's going through your head, we invite people to talk about what kinds of thoughts are happening at that incident. Now we're going to get into reactions. And this is where we talk about the personal impact on you. What made an impact on you? What was the worst thing about what you experienced? This is where we're personalizing. Now we're going from kind of there is an infrastructure to this. We're going from intellectual into emotional into educational, the series of steps. So, how did this personally impact you? Now, step number 5. How has the impact of that incident affected you now? What's going on for you now? What's happening? What behaviors? What signs of distress are you experiencing? Some might say, I'm not. Nothing's going on with me. But someone else might be saying, I'm having a hard time. You just never know, because everyone's processing in their own unique way. Uh, I was recently doing I set up a debriefing for a team for a fire department that had a suicide took place, and there was some other stuff. And one of the guys called me back and said, "Can I do a one-on-one with you?" And it turned out that he needed to talk more about what was happening, because there was another death unrelated to the fire department, but closely connected to the people the family of the person who died. And so it was really stressing him out. Now everybody else was sort of moving along okay. So what are signs of distress you're experiencing? Well, you might be not sleeping. You might not be eating. You might go back up to, some of these examples of, whoops, where's my signs of stress? Here, you might be experiencing some of these things: anger, helplessness, suicide ideation, loss of appetite. All these are signs of stress affecting you in a negative way. And this takes us to step number 6, the teaching. The teaching of what are healthy ways to respond to stress. What are the different kinds of coping mechanisms that are available to you? Now, again, unfortunately, due to time, I can't really go into these now with you, because there are a lot of things. But I have some material that you'll be able to access, and I'll show it to you before we completely finish up, that walks you through this in more detail. Again, I'm just giving you the kind of the introduction to CISM. If you want to pursue it, if you want to learn more, there are ways to do that. But step number 6, very important. What we're doing is we're doing a couple things at the same time. One, we're identifying the unhealthy behaviors that people are beginning to experience, and we want to say to them, hey, that's a normal response to a really bad situation. Okay? So you're not crazy because you're having these thoughts or you're having these experiences. That's totally a normal, for you, that's a normal response to this traumatic event. However, we don't want that normal experience to become the new behavior. So we want to get you back to how you were before that stressful event took place. That's what I meant by going back to sort of adaptive to back to your normal ways. That's where the teaching comes in. What are ways of dealing with stress? How do you manage it? Helping them know, hey, these crazy feelings or thoughts you're having, yeah, they're crazy, but they're not you forever. This is just you processing through, and here's how we work through these processing. Now, sometimes what we realize is that we're going to need help. We're going to need more than just peer support, and that's also important. We can set people up with different, kind of therapies. It might be with a clergy person. It might be, who knows what in your communities. Finally, we're talking about reentry, and reentry is we're bringing things to a close. And bringing things to a close is, again, by saying, hey, having negative thoughts, having behaviors that you don't like after a stressful event is a normal way to respond. You just don't want that to become the normal way that you live your life. I hope that I'm making that distinction clear enough. It could be confusing, I'm aware. But, you know, you learn something bad happened, you might get sad and cry. That's a normal response. You don't want to be crying every day thereafter because that bad thing happened once. So you have the experience. I'm not saying crying is bad, just I'm trying to make an example. You have a response, and and it's appropriate for that time, but you don't want that to be your response for how you live your life. So that's critical incident stress management, and I've introduced you to the one-on-one interactions, and I've introduced you to the diffusing and also the more complicated 7 steps of a debriefing. Um, and I also introduced you to AAR, which is in its own way a kind of debrief, a kind of diffusing, but with a slightly different orientation. Now, I'm about to run out of time, so I want to show you real quickly one last thing, and this will be available to you. Um, Let me got to get it to show up on here. Whoops, just a second. This is secure. We're part of what's called a secure network here. It's an acronym. I'm not going to bore you with it, but this is a brochure. It's available to you, and it talks through what you not what you want to you know what you might want to share with somebody or you want to look at for yourself. Talks about different ways of dealing with the stresses around you. I'm scrolling through it kind of quickly. I realize that, but let me because I want to get down to. Here's common responses to stressful events. You can see the list is much longer than I put up. And what can you control right now? It's all gives you steps. This is we share this with that with everybody who goes through a debriefing. We make it available. We send them the link, and the link will be available to all of you, so you have access to it. I encourage you to share the link, to download it, print these things out if you want, or just have them on your phone. It's really useful information to have around. And if you have questions about it at a future time, well, we can talk about that. We can find a way to connect. So let me stop sharing my screen and. Um, well, I know um, you guys probably feel like you were at the trying to drink info from a fire hose, from a fire line. I've gave you a lot of information about the AAR and about crisis incident stress management. Um, my sense was that but that you all would absorb it, and what resonated, what sticks with you, you'll use. And if you have follow-up questions, you can go back and watch the video when it's available online. And you can reach me through Africa Fire Mission if you want to learn more about this whole thing of CISM work and the debriefings. So on that note, I'm going to open up the floor for any questions that you might have. If you have them, probably best just to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask the question. And I'll do this for a couple of minutes and then we'll go into the tea time. And for those who need to get going, I do want to say thank you again to everybody who's given an hour of your evening and a bunch of your bundles for this program. I do really appreciate you coming out. Wanted to make sure that you got a lot of information. And do give us feedback and check on and look on in the chat for that information for how to get all this access to stuff to the material. So on that note, um, if you have any questions or comments you want to share, go ahead and just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask. Peter, you have a question? Comment?
Yes, yes. Thank you for the facilitation of the stress.
Peter, you're breaking up. You put your comment in the chat, and you're breaking up. We can't hear what you're saying. Put your comment in the chat, and I'll respond to it. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else have something they want to share, ask? Okay, I'm going to stop the recording, and then that'll give us. We'll go to the tea time, and um, thank you all for coming out again. I want to appreciate you being here.